And welcome back to Mike Ferry TV. It is the week of March 25th. We're going to continue, as we started a couple weeks ago, with some of the questions that were sent to me during our production retreat. And I picked out questions that were common to a lot of people. Many of these questions were asked 10, 15 times by different members of our audience. We had about 2,200 people in Las Vegas at the production retreat, so receiving several hundred questions is not uncommon, and I hope that you're learning from the questions that are being asked, because most of them apply to all of us. So here's question number one. How do I strengthen my listing presentation, besides obviously just practicing the scripts? And you know, it's interesting. A listing presentation is a performance. You've heard me say that before. But it's a performance that is not going to get paid upon, meaning you're getting paid, unless you perform at a very high level. Now, let's be very honest. Sometimes we get a listing because the seller is a friend, a neighbor, a relative, and they would not give it to anybody but you. Sometimes we get a listing by mistake. You know, the seller decides to sell. You happen to have contacted by the phone or by mail or by door or social media at the very moment they were thinking about selling, and you were the chosen one. But most of the time, you're going to get a listing because you've been doing something strong prior to the listing itself. So what I want you to think about when people say, how do I strengthen my presentation? Strengthen everything you're doing prior to the presentation. Strengthen the prospecting you do, the tone of your voice, the questions you ask, how you listen. Strengthen your lead follow-up. Become much more aggressive in your lead follow-up. Strengthen the pre-qualifying process. Now, the reason I'm saying this to you is because as you strengthen everything prior to, they're going to be more impressed with what you say when you arrive. If you're weak in your prior to and you're weak in your presentation, they'll detect that. Strengthen the pre-listing package you send out. Strengthen your call back to confirm that the appointment's on and that they've read the package. But then obviously practicing your scripts. Now, when it comes to practicing in front of a mirror, watching yourself, your facial expressions. How do you look? Now, we all, I saw that report that said that 95% of all people in America think they're handsome or beautiful. Well, the mirrors are obviously distorted, okay, if that is the case. But practice in front of the mirror to see how you look and how you present. Record your presentation and do it once a week for several weeks and listen to it. And are you hesitating? Are you or are you very clear in your diction and pronunciation of words? These are all the things you can do to make yourself a much stronger listing presenter. Question number two. What specific examples, Mike, of applying versatility on a listing presentation can you give us? Well, as you recall, we've talked about versatility hundreds of times over our time together on Mike Ferry TV. All right, versatility, the ability to adapt very quickly to a person different than yourself, the ability to adapt to a situation, okay? So let's say that you happen to be very expressive. All right, expressives are very demonstrative. They're going to talk a lot. They're going to be smiling and moving around, and they're disjointed many times, and they many times have a hard time finishing or completing a sentence because they're jumping from thought to thought. But your seller is analytical or a driver or amiable. All right, so versatility. How well can you adapt to that person? All right, so I say as a high expressive, I first of all have to say to myself, I got to follow my script, because the high expressive is going to be talking a lot and be all over the place. They're exciting to be around, but they can also drive a driver or an amiable completely crazy. So an example of versatility, I'm talking to a driver. Mr. and Mrs. Smith, I assume what you are looking for is just simply, what are the results that I'm going to bring you? Is that correct? Now, that's what a driver wants to hear. It's hard for the highly expressive person to say that. If you're working with an analytical and you're highly expressive, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, I assume what you want are the 5 exact things I'm going to do to get your home sold. Is that correct? And I'm sure you want to know exactly how I came to the price I came forward with. Is that right? They go, right. All right, that's how the versatility comes into play. All right, your versatility, your high express, you're dealing with an amiable personality. I'm assuming you would like the buyer to feel as good about the home as you feel. Would that be a fair statement? Oh, yes, absolutely. So tell me how you feel about the home so I can share that with potential buyer. Those three examples for the high expressive are very difficult. It takes a lot of discipline to do those kind of things because the expressive wants to just be all over the place. So what I want you to think about is, what is your personality style? And how well do you relate to people that are not of your style? And how are you going to change what you say to bring them in and draw them in so they can hear what you're saying instead of having to deal with your personality? Question number 3. This is a fun one. You receive a referral from your database or another MFO agent, and you discover the prospect that you've been given is not motivated or is not realistic. How do you explain that to the referral source without offending them? I've had this happen many times. I remember a phone call I received as an agent 100 years ago, and it was Mrs. Smith. I can't remember her exact name. Hi, Mike, it's Mrs. Smith, and I want to thank you again for getting our home sold. Listen, one of our friends wants to sell their home. I said, oh. And she said, and we want you to talk to them, and we told them all about you. But we told them really what you're like. And I remember saying to her, well, what did you tell them? Well, we told them how strong you are and how direct you are, and we explained that you're not like most people. I said, well, thank you for that. Well, I called the prospect, and they had no desire to sell. They were looking for an estimate of what their home was worth if they ever decided to sell. So I talked to that prospect. Then I called back the referral source and said, hi, Ms. Smith, it's Mike. I've talked to your friends. They're not ready to do anything at this time, but I'm going to follow up with them. Okay, thank you. All right, so here's the answer. You're not going to offend them if you're open and honest. You're not going to offend them if you're upfront with the referral source as to what's going on. So be upfront, open, and honest about what you've learned when you call the people. Question 4, I'm working on my versatility. It came up again in our questions. And it's very difficult for me to deal with my own ego and my having to be right. And this has been cultivated by years of having to be right. What would you suggest I work on? Well, you know, it's interesting. We talk about versatility and people say, how do I become more versatile? Well, I always say, quit having to be right in every conversation. And they kind of look at me and they say, well, why? Because I am right. I said, well, think about this. If you have to be right, somebody else has to be wrong. And how often do you win a seller or a buyer to your side when you're proving to them that they're wrong? It's not going to happen. So the biggest thing is to accept the fact that you're having to be right makes somebody else having to be wrong. And understanding that as soon as you prove they're wrong, the options for them listing or buying from somebody else have been opened and are way out there for them to deal with. So when you have a versatility problem and you're so key on having to be right, just remember, if I do display that emotion, that temperament, that display of a lack of discipline to a prospect, all I'm doing is proving they're wrong. And if I prove them wrong, they walk away. Question 5 today, how do we become more competitive if we're not competitive by nature? This came up probably a month or 6 weeks ago on one of my mornings with Mike calls. And it was interesting because one of the ladies said, I'm just not competitive by nature. How do I become more competitive? And I said, well, think about this. If you normally get to work, say at 8:30, as an example, to the office, why don't you compete for a week or 10 days and see if you can get there at 8, just to see if you can do something more competitive. If you normally make 15 contacts a day, let's see if for a month you can make 25. okay? Or in essence, compete with yourself. Compete with yourself. Compete with the goals you've set. Compete with extending some of your basic activities to a higher or different level. See, when you compete with yourself, you become competitive. If you're competing with somebody else, it's temporary. You're in a race. You're not going to be racing that person all day long for days or weeks or months. You race them for 100 yards or a mile or 2 miles. So you're competitive only for a short period of time. Now, yes, some people are born competitive, some are not. But you can learn to be competitive by competing against your plans, your goals, by stretching yourself just a little bit. And then question number 6. I put a lot of time and energy into my pre-listing package and prepping for my listing appointments. If I don't get the listing signed on the spot, how do I follow up? Well, there's a lot of opinions on this. Should you leave the pre-listing package with the seller if they don't sign the contract? Should you take the pre-listing package with you if they don't sign the contract? And you notice in both cases, I gave you the same response. It always depends upon the motivation of the seller, how badly and how quickly they want to get a contract signed, and have you really found out if they're talking to 2 or 3 other agents, or are they just thinking about it overnight? So I'm going to say to you, if you have a 7 o'clock appointment and they want to think about it overnight, they have another appointment the next day, great. What time is your appointment tomorrow? At 5 o'clock? Good, I'll call you at 6, and then please tell me what you want to do. So now you've given a designated time to do the follow-up. Well, we have a second appointment at 7 o'clock tomorrow night. Well, good, then I'll call you at 8 and I'll find out what you want to do. Or in essence, you're aggressive in lead follow-up. Be aggressive when you don't get a listing and they haven't committed to sign with somebody else. The more aggressive you are, the better chance you have. So I'm going to do something a little different. Here we are in March. We have our Superstar Retreat coming up in July. Okay? A lot of you attend. We have 4,000 plus people in attendance each year. Hopefully you'll be there. Building and maintaining top production is my theme for the 2019 Superstar Retreat. Building and maintaining top production. And I'm dividing the retreat into 4 categories. 30 specific prospecting skills that set you apart from the competition. I'm going to cover 30. 30 listing skill sets we have to develop to win 75% of the time and get a contract signed. 30 objection handling skill sets that means you can counter anything that your sellers and buyers say to get contracts signed. And 30 specific mindset enhancers so when you are having a bad day, you can rebound quickly. Watch, that's 120 very specific thoughts I'm going to cover during the Superstar Retreat. I would like to think that you're going to attend. If you do, call the office and get signed up. Thanks for this week. We'll talk to you again next week. Have a great week.